I'm Neil Mansilla, developer advocate at Atlassian. I've been with Atlassian for over 7 years as a dev advocate. What that means is that I advocate on behalf of anybody and everybody that builds apps or integrations on top of the Atlassian platform. So my job is to represent you within Atlassian and help you to build great solutions for yourselves, for your customers, for perhaps even other Atlassian customers out there if you're a marketplace partner. If you've ever had ideas on improving Jira, Confluence, wish that there was an app for something, particularly if you are an admin, Forge is something you need to look into. Forge makes it a lot easier to build apps, whether you're a beginner or an advanced developer. First, a high-level overview of Dashboard Gadgets and Forge, and then key concepts in Forge, what it takes to start building your first app, or in this case, we're going to do a dashboard gadget or two. And then just really quick glance at the developer documentation, then start building. A Jira dashboard, sometimes it's the first thing you see when you launch Jira in your browser. Dashboards help us see important information at a glance, right? It helps us to kind of zoom out, get a big picture of the things that we're working on. You can create dashboards, customize them, even share them with your teammates. I know that when I was just a Jira user, it was just a dashboard. I never messed around with it. Somebody else had created it. If I had known it was very customizable, you can drag things around and add new gadgets, it would have been amazing. Here, look at this screen. At the top left, we have a gadget for recently created issues on a particular project. The bottom right is a different gadget, the pie chart that displays the number of issues within epics. You can click on those things. Very easy to add these things. And in fact, you can add them yourself. Go to your dashboard view, hit edit. There are about 34, 35 gadgets out of the box that come with Jira Cloud. So let's say I wanted to add the pie chart. I'll drag it up to the right. Configure it for the first time. Let's type in a project name. Let's go for epics. Update it automatically and save. And that's how easy it is to mess around with dashboards. But out of the admins in the crowd, how often have you heard, man, that's great, but I'd love if the dashboard could do this, or if it could display that, right? So can you customize this for me? And really the answer is yes. You can build your own custom gadgets using Forge. And so what is Forge? Forge is Atlassian's serverless cloud development platform. It helps you build apps that are secure, reliable, and scalable, apps that extend the functionality of Atlassian Cloud products. You build them, they run on the Atlassian Cloud. Forge handles a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So if you've ever had to build, deploy, and manage like a SaaS app or a cloud app, it's not an easy thing to do, and Forge makes that a lot easier. So what can you build with Forge? Like anything you can dream up. I'm going to speak broadly in terms of the types of apps and their capabilities. You can build anything. I'll start with this category. I call it a UI-based app. Forge makes it really easy to extend the product UI. If you want to build an app that enhances Jira's UI, adds new pages, sections, or exposes new information in the issue view, you can do that with Forge. If you're more of a back-end person, and your goal is to maybe, I wish I could automate this thing. If you have any experience of building scripts or using automation for Jira, this is another use case. Forge is great at performing complex automations. So a Forge app doesn't have to be just in the UI and the user messing around with it. It can operate in the background, triggered by a product event like a value changing on an issue or a Confluence page. You can also schedule your Forge app to run on a fixed time interval. If you ever had ideas about building an app that reacts to something happening, to an issue, a page, or a bucket pull request, you can build a Forge app that does that, and it can operate completely in the background. And there are also times in which you might want to build an integration. So what I mean by that is like a bridge or a pipeline between Jira and an external product or platform that your company uses. You can do that with Forge. Your Forge app just can call APIs that are external, like a CRM, ERP, maybe an external deploy platform. Your Forge app can even receive API calls from authorized outside systems. So very, very flexible. Some of the most popular apps in the Atlassian marketplace are integrations. Again, for the admins in the crowd, if workflow validators are something you probably know very well that users probably don't know very well, you can build a Forge app that can create the custom validations within your Jira workflows. So for instance, if you have a Kanban board, you want to enforce strict work in progress limits, you can build a validator in Forge with very little code that will restrict an issue from being transitioned, let's say to work in progress when a certain limit's reached. You can build post functions and conditions as well that are powered by Forge and code logic. So who uses this thing? Like who actually uses Forge to build things? Developers, first of all, because it is an app development platform, of course. But we also have admins and power users that use Forge to build apps, scripts, or integrations for their organization. And there's a growing number of end users discovering, wow, I didn't realize that it's so easy to build a Forge app to do something that I wanted to do. And we're seeing a lot of uptick in end users that are using Forge to improve just how they work with the products. And of course, we have partners, both solution partners and marketplace partners. More apps on the marketplace are being built on Forge than ever before. And I think this is an important one that Atlassian team members ourselves, we use this a lot. And why that's important is because sometimes you have platform or APIs that you externalize, but you don't necessarily use them internally. And that is completely not the case with Atlassian. We have adopted Forge internally, and a lot of people use it. So that's a really good positive sign. So I know I mentioned that you could do things for Jira. You can build Forge apps for Jira and Confluence, Bitbucket, JSM, Compass, and now even Rovo. Why did we build Forge? Why would you use it? So Forge has a lot of benefits, and one of them is that it's Atlassian hosted. That means you don't have to provision servers or manage infrastructure because Atlassian does that all for you. Also, in terms of security, this was one of the core reasons and impetus behind building Forge was to build a very secure app building environment and hosting deployment and runtime environment that runs on Atlassian infrastructure. It handles things like multi-tenancy, which means separating data between installations and customers if you have an app spread across multiple instances. These things are not trivial to do, and Forge just handles that for you out of the box. And lastly, I know it says on the screen here, extensible UI, but it's really just extensibility, period. But from a UI standpoint, you can add sections and pages to Jira issue views, create macros, etc. We have a lot of pre-built components that make app and UI development easier and faster. We have something that we call UI Kit, which we'll get into. You also have the ability to use custom UI, where you can bring in your own assets and have JS and CSS, etc., bundled into your app and not necessarily use our components. And now I think there's even the hybrid between the two. So maybe some of you know that there is essentially an app store for Atlassian products called the Atlassian Marketplace. Here you can find great examples and inspiration for what kind of apps people build. Admins primarily know about the marketplace because they're the ones responsible and have the access to install apps. I'm always surprised that even some of our most advanced developers and users are not even aware that this thing exists. But there are over 6,000 apps and integrations on the Atlassian Marketplace. They're quite popular with customers. There's over $4 billion in lifetime sales of apps from the marketplace. And earlier, when I said that there were about 30 dashboard gadgets out of the box that you get with Jira Cloud, on the marketplace, you can find at least 100 custom dashboard gadgets built by partners. Some are free, some are paid. Every one of these apps were built by partners, and some are very powerful and inspired to fix a particular problem. Some of these have thousands of installations and users throughout the world. They just built a dashboard gadget and put it up on the marketplace. Today, I'm going to introduce you to how you can start building your own custom gadget with Forge. Maybe you just want to build a custom gadget for your own personal use, maybe for your team, maybe your company. And now you know that you can also publish your gadget on the marketplace as an app if you think that other people throughout the world might find it useful. Let's go over some concepts in Forge so that when I hop over to the command line and start building one from scratch, you'll have an idea of what the heck I'm using. First thing you're going to see me do is hop into my command line, and I'm going to use this thing called the Forge CLI, or Command Line Interface. This is the tool that you need to work with Forge apps. You'll use the Forge CLI to create apps, deploy them to the cloud, and then install them onto your instance. If you've already installed the Forge CLI, then you know that it only takes a few minutes to do it. It works the same across PC, Mac, or Linux. As we go through the session, you'll see which commands I'm using. Next is this thing called a manifest. Now, it's just a text file, but it's used to define your Forge app and how it behaves. Don't worry, you do not have to create the manifest from scratch. The Forge CLI does it for you. But it's a very important file because it outlines the modules, functions, and other resources your app will use to extend the product using the cooking analogy. Let's say we're making a dish like Wiener Schnitzel. The finished dish is your Forge app. And in that sense, in this analogy, the manifest is the recipe. It outlines ingredients and directions for preparing that dish. So the other key concept I mentioned are modules. And the Forge platform exposes product extension points and capabilities in the form of modules. Modules describe how a Forge app will interact with the product like Jira or Confluence. And following that cooking analogy, if the manifest file is the recipe, then the modules are ingredients and step-by-step directions for handling the ingredients. For example, if you wanted to add a panel to the Jira issue view, you add this corresponding module called Jira Issue Panel. And in the documentation is all the information about what is the interface, what are the requirements for this entry in the manifest. You don't have to do these things by hand. Forge will show you how it's done, and the documentation gives you a lot of opportunities to copy and paste. What's needed to get started? First, an Atlassian account and dev instance, like a sandbox instance. Even if you have admin access to your company's instances, please do not use them for development and testing, just because you can get a free instance that's standalone, fully functional suite of all the cloud products, Jira, JSM, Confluence, even Rovo. When you have your own personal sandbox instance, it's just fun having the keys to the kingdom and knowing you're not going to screw something up or mangle your company's data at all in Jira or Confluence. Next is installing Node.js on your local computer, which I sometimes call your dev environment. Node.js is free open source JavaScript runtime environment. We're going to be coding our apps in JavaScript. You'll also have to install the Forge CLI, and that just takes a couple minutes. And though not required, I do recommend, particularly if you're just embarking on this, if you're an advanced developer, you already use one, but an editor, or we call them an IDE, which is just means integrated development environment. So just a fancy text editor. This one is free. It's a Visual Studio Code. It does some syntax highlighting, gives you the ability to use plugins and extensions, which are becoming quite popular. As an example, using AI coding assistance as well. I'm going to be using that when I do some demos in a second. So zooming in on those steps, first, you want to get your own free dev instance. It gives you your own personal private Confluence sandbox to build and test your apps. You can give it your email and a unique site name. This is going to be the site name that you'll be using to install the app, which again, I'll show you, we'll be going through in a bit. Next thing you'll need is Node.js and the Forge CLI. So just go to that URL or just go to developer.atlassian.com and you'll be brought to essentially step-by-step instructions on how to get this thing installed and whether you're on Mac, Linux, or Windows. And it is a lot of text, but it's very, very few steps. Just follow the directions. You can't go wrong. Once that's installed, we're going to build our first Forge app. We're set up at this point. You have your dev instance, you have Node.js, you have the Forge CLI, and we're just going to run this command Forge create. It's going to ask a few questions. The name of your app, category, thematically, what are you trying to build, for which product, and then what module. And what this is going to do, it's going to download a template, a blank app in most cases. It's just going to print out the words like hello world. Locally, what it's going to do, it's going to make a new folder on your local machine, and that's where all the code's going to live, and you're going to find things like the manifest, etc. Okay, so once we have that app on our local machine, from the Forge create, we're going to run this command Forge deploy, and this will deploy into the Atlassian Cloud. So this is essentially getting it ready to be installed and run on an instance, but we're not quite there yet. So this is the equivalent of, let's say, going to a hosting provider, putting it up on Amazon EC2, or let's say Heroku. Like, it's ready to be run, but it's not necessarily going to run yet. The last step is Forge install. And this is actually going to ask us like, hey, what's your instance name? So in your case, your dev instance name. Once it's there, it's installed. Now, this is the equivalent of like side loading an app. Or if you were to go to, let's say, the App Store on your phone, or to the Atlassian Marketplace, if you were an admin and you install an app, this is essentially the same pattern. This is that installation step. Since most of you have not messed around with Forge yet, you definitely want to check out the developer documentation. It is packed with lots of guides, tutorials, and reference docs that are absolutely essential to help you learn how to build powerful and useful apps. So you'll find them at developer.atlassian.com. I'm going to head over to a browser when I'm coding. You'll see different sections. There's a lot of information there. Don't be overwhelmed, right? Particularly if you will find in the guides, tutorials, etc. Those are very helpful if you're a beginner. But there's even beyond the guides, there's the reference docs. If you go to the very top, you click on reference. There's tons of data, way too much stuff that I could squeeze into 30, 45 minutes. But luckily, it's well documented, very comprehensive. Don't get overwhelmed by how much is there. Go to the reference docs when you need them, but don't start there. Every single product has its own product REST API. So if you need your app to fetch issue information, user information, project information, nearly everything you can do in the product, you can do with the API. There are hundreds of REST API methods. API stands for Application Programming Interface. It's a programmatic way to query data, put data, make changes to an issue, add comments. Every app in Jira or Confluence that does something useful with the customer data is utilizing these REST APIs to do everything from creating issues, pages, comments, modifying them, deleting them, messing around with permissions. Like, again, you can do this programmatically. If you consider yourself a beginner or even a seasoned developer, you're going to spend a lot of time in the docs. A great place to start, at least for someone who learns like I do, I love to learn by example, are the sample apps. So I find that when I'm learning something new, like a new language or new framework, that learning by example, incredibly useful. So imagine taking a Forge app that someone else has built. You can install it on your instance. You can go back to your laptop and look at the source code and the manifest and all that. Play around with it, experiment, see how it works. How does it break? How you can extend it to make it a little bit better. You can find a whole set of them in the docs. Great starting points would be like, there's this project introduction app, and it uses a different module called Jira Global Page, and it introduces you to components like the lozenge, the button, and how to align things with stack and inline. If you're into UI in particular, like this is a great sample app for that. Sometimes the best way to represent data is with like a graph or a chart, and Forge has a number of UI kit modules that make it easy to create bar charts, stack charts, pie charts, many more. And there's the example app that has every single chart that is available inside UIKit, and it slaps them on a page. Within minutes, you can have this app running, understand what does it take to seed the data in terms of what does the data structure look like to go into this thing. And with very, very few lines of code, you can start creating visualizations. Another great sample app is the issue translator, and it adds translation options to Jira issues to work across languages. If you're a Rovo or Atlassian Intelligence user already, that some things are kind of baked in, but this is a great demo app that demonstrates how easy it is to integrate with external APIs, because this one is using some kind of language translation API out in the wild. It also uses the issue panel module, so it adds a little panel to the issue view. It's a great way to understand how simple it is to pull data from an external source. And we're talking more about this next week, building Rovo apps within the developer documentation, creating virtual agents, taking particular actions. I'm not going to get into that now. One thing I did learn is that not everybody is super familiar with Rovo yet, but a subsequent Cologne Ace will be presenting a little intro on Rovo and how to build custom virtual agents using Forge. You can build agents using UI, but you can also more powerful, customizable, intelligent agents in code. All right, let's dive into building our very first custom gadget using Forge. I'm going to hop into a browser and start from scratch. I have the Forge CLI installed, and I'm logged in. If I type in Forge, who am I? It's going to show me Beyonce is my coding ego. I'm going to create an app, a dashboard gadgets. Here's my dashboard. If you go to your dashboards and hit edit, there's a whole list of stock gadgets that you can install, but I want to create my own and I'll put it right there. That's the goal. Here we go. Let's give it a name. First gadget. Here's the questions they're asking you. So select a category. We're going to choose UIKit. We're going to choose Jira and find dashboard gadget. So here's that point in time in which it is downloading a Hello World scaffolded, very simple app, putting it on my laptop right now. It's registering the app. So it's actually creating like a record on Atlassian that this person is creating a brand new app. And then it's also creating these environments, development, staging, and production. But we don't have to get into that right now. Let's just hope that this thing will create our app in a short amount of time. Sometimes can take up to 30 seconds, but usually when it's live demo, it might be longer. When you install the Forge CLI, you will have to do like a Forge login command. You only do it once, and it's going to ask for your Atlassian ID email address, as well as this thing called an API token. You do not type in your password. When you go to the go.Atlassian Forge 101, the step-by-step tutorial, it'll tell you about this. Do not type in your password. You'll be pasting a personal access token, essentially. There we go. So this is what we have. It says created first gadget. Your app is ready to work on, deploy, and install. Let's go into first gadget and let's take a look. There's all the files it created and folders. I'm going to hop into Visual Studio Code Editor. First gadget, here we go. So I did mention the manifest after the CLI. This is what the manifest looks like. Like I said, you do not have to create this thing by hand. That would not be fun. This is the module our app is using, which is a Jira Dashboard Gadget. If you went to developer.atlassian.com and let's type in Dashboard Gadget. 1 second. Here we go. Reference, modules, Jira Dashboard Gadget. This is the full documentation for the module. So they'll give you in the docs some code examples, as well as all of the properties inside the manifest when we did the Forge create. Back to this is the name of the app. All these things inside this manifest, which is like the recipe, is just pointing to where in the code should I be doing things. So this is just the manifest. The actual code is inside the source folder. And you notice there's a backend. It's called resolvers. Let's take a look and see what this does on the front end. What's it going to render? So there's a bunch of these imports. We're importing some libraries, but the crux of it, it looks like on a screen, this edit screen, like configuration screen, is going to ask some questions. Then there's the view, which is the actual render. On a dashboard gadget, you have the configure and the view. So I'm in edit mode right now, editing my dashboard. This is the configuration view for this gadget. When I'm done editing, this is the regular view that gets rendered. These gadgets are the stock gadgets that came with Jira Cloud, but these are just apps that somebody at Atlassian built. So again, let's go here. We did our Forge create. Let's do a Forge deploy. This is going to check for some syntax errors. It's going to bundle up the assets within our app, all of the code, our manifest, etc. And then it's going to upload it to the cloud. The last step after deployment is a command called Forge install. Okay. So here it is, deployed to the development environment. And now, is it on my instance? If I were to edit this dashboard, it probably will not be. We're missing one last step, and that is Forge install. It's going to ask for the name of our test instance. First, it asks you for the product. We're choosing Jira. I'm going to paste in the name of the instance, nothing else, no HTTPs in front of it, no slashes at the end, just like that. This is essentially sideloading the app. And you do have to have admin access in order to do that step, which is why having your own personal instance solves all those problems. And it says, hey, install complete, your app is now there. If this was an app I was building into the issue view, we can go right into a Jira issue and see it. But here we added a gadget. Let's go to add gadget. Let me make sure I reload this so that it'll refresh all that. I want to add a gadget, and there it is. The first gadget. We're in development. It will say development, and it says by Beyonce Mars. And there it is. So what does this thing do? This is the config view. So if I type in Germany and hit submit, this is the view of the actual app. We saw the config where I typed in something, and now it's just echoing it back. This is what we mean by hello world. If you're not a developer, hello world is typically the kind of thing that you want to build a very, very simple app that will just echo back the words hello world. What we have here is our very first app. That's how quick it is to build something. So let's make a change. Instead of hello world, let's say hello people out there in Cologne. I'm going to save that. I could redeploy it, but that could take a little while. So I'm going to use this other command, Forge tunnel. It makes it a lot easier to like really rapidly iterate on changes and things. If you want to make some changes without having to go through the whole deploy process, you can just run this, and all of the requests of our app are now intercepted and sent to my laptop. If I hit refresh, look at that. Hello, people out there in Cologne. Let's make one more change. Let's make part 2 again. And when I save it, in the terminal, it reloaded everything. It was hot loaded the code. If I go back to the dashboard gadget and reload that, boom, there it is. We have created our first gadget. Not very fancy. It doesn't do a whole lot, but that's the hello world part of it, right? So we're running low on time, but we could take any of our sample apps mentioned earlier. If we go to developer.atlassian.com, Forge, and we go to learn example apps, like any one of these apps, you can take snippets of code, pop it in here and see what happens. What I'd like to do is do something like this. But what about building an app that pulls data from an external API source, a classic integration? This is the kind of gadget I want to build. A UI-based app and an integration. It's going to get weather data from it. You could use the Open Weather API. They have a free tier. You can make 1,000 calls a day. They have their own documentation. Hey, this is how you make an API call. And if I were to hop into code, again, I was going to do this more iteratively, but since we're short on time, I'm just going to show you the end product. Now hop into my editor and load up the code. It's not complex. We have our manifest using the Jira Dashboard Gadget. And if you go into the front end, you'll see the edit, which is like the configuration view. And instead of asking for one value, it's asking for a city name and a country name. The view will pull up and display weather data. On the back end, this will request some geo information, get the lat long for the city and country, get the weather data, and pass it to the front end. Let me go to Gadget Weather and Forge, install, make sure, I think it might be there already. Let's take a look. I think I have it there. So let's just run the tunnel and install that gadget. A very basic gadget that does some pretty cool things. So if I search for the gadget weather, there it is. Add that. Configuration view done. Configure it. Edit. Berlin. Germany. And look in the background what's happening. I'm running the tunnel. I can see the console logs, debug information. This is great for iterative development. Hit submit. And with a few lines of code, we collected data on the configuration screen. We made an API call to do geocoding to get the lat long, and then one more API call to fetch the actual weather. We did this by going to the Open Weather Map API to learn zero interface. It's a really simple app. And in fact, if you wanted to do this yourself, step by step, from scratch, head over to the Forge Quest, because here you're going to find we have a fun and easy thing to follow where you get some challenging quests through tutorials, including an instructional lesson on building this weather gadget app from 0 lines of code. The tutorial is apprentice level. If you're new to Forge development, start with novice level quests. Head to atlassian.com/forge-quest. It's a fun, easy way to have step-by-step explanations of what we're doing and how we're building this up from Forge Create, from no code at all to having something that does exactly what I just demonstrated in that demo. Just a really quick wrap up here. Steps. First, get your free dev instance in Sandbox. Again, please don't, even if you're an admin, don't do it on your company's instance. Get the Forge CLI and Node.js installed. It will take you, at beginner, it'll take you maximum 12, 13 minutes. Explore the docs. There's a lot of them, but go to the sample apps and some of the guides. We have a developer community at community.developer.atlassian.com. The people that answered the poll that said you're already seasoned developers, I know you're already there. For the rest of you, check that out because it's developers and partners helping with any kinds of questions. Similar to the Cologne group, we have our own Atlassian developer YouTube channel where you're going to find not just a whole lot of different things, but particularly like how to stay on top of all the things that are changing, things that we're launching on Forge in terms of the capabilities, as well as longer form tutorials. There's a 2-hour tutorial on starting from scratch, how to customize Confluence, how to customize Jira with Forge, etc. And lastly, thank you. I'm excited to see what the kind of stuff that you build. But if you're looking for like inspiration on what you can build with Forge, obviously you have the Atlassian Marketplace. We also have an annual hackathon called Codegeist. You can go to developer.atlassian.com and search. You'll see our Codegeist announcement. It'll probably be later this fall, where there are thousands of people that come together and build apps to compete for glory, prizes, and cash. We just announced the winners a couple months ago, and you can see that list. It's fantastic to see thousands of ideas germinating, and then all of a sudden, close to the deadline, all these apps materialize, hundreds of apps that people built from scratch to compete in Codegeist. So definitely want to check that out as well. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you a lot, Nick. The chat is wild. Here's the first question. Will apps always be split by product, or can an app span both Jira Service Management, Jira and Confluence?
No, it's not always going to be that way. We have an annual developers conference called Atlas Camp, just held in Belgium, and I think that was one of the announcements. This is something that's been on the roadmap. When I used the Forge CLI and did the Forge install, it asked some product-specific questions, particularly on the install part, and I think that's the crux of this question. So right now, you install an app, it is essentially bound to, let's say, just Jira, and not on the Confluence instance. Going forward, I don't have the exact target date, but it'll be pinned to a primary product you installed it to. A Forge app will be able to access other products on that same instance. It's not always going to be that way, is the answer to your question.
What was the template you used for the app? The person is referring to the weather app.
I guess maybe the short answer to that is go to the Forge Quest and you'll see it for yourself, right? There's step by step. It is going to be a Jira Dashboard Gadget template. Follow it carefully. It'll take you about 40 minutes, but by the end, you'll know exactly like the answer to your question about what makes this app tick. Just go through the Forge Quest.
So the next question, does the Jira product also work for JSM?
Yes, you can build apps for JSM. There's a fuzzy line there, right? But yes, you have access to JSM methods as well as the interface. There are modules that are specific to JSM around the portal, etc. The short answer is yes, it spans both.
The next question is, Forge application is not showing on company managed project. Is there any limitation?
The Forge is not showing on a company managed project. I'm not sure if what you're experiencing is something I'm familiar with. If it's not showing up, reach out directly to me after this and I can look at the problem you're running into.
Will we get an email to leave feedback on Forge? Yes, there will be a survey, but this one we'll have to actually share with Neil. If you have more dedicated Forge question, maybe this is a great time, Neil. Where can they place those questions?
The best place to go is community.developer.atlassian.com. There are no stupid questions, regardless of your level. Definitely recommend posting dev questions there, even beginner ones. Those are sometimes the most welcome ones.
I had a question, but you touched on it when you integrated with the Open Weather API, so we can build dashboards that take metrics from an external monitoring tool. Maybe you have covered the monitoring tool part somewhere in any other examples already? Or customers did tell you about something like that?
There are metrics for your app on developer.atlassian.com. Go to developer.atlassian.com and click on your little user icon. You can hit to My Apps or type in My Apps. Here's all the apps. Find Weather app I created. If you click into that, you'll see observability things like metrics, logs, I would say are probably pretty important. You can see if you console logged anything earlier, I just added some console logs and it dumped them to my screen when I was running Forge Tunnel. If you're not running the tunnel, it would put them on the back end. Console logs end up in the browser. But to your question about metrics, yeah, there's invocation metrics, like how often your app was run. So an invocation is just like a run. So every time that dashboard displays on someone's browser, that counts as an invocation, and you can go and see the data within the developer dashboard. I hope that answers your question.
Another question, can Forge be auto-triggered? While we render the issues, can we use Forge to show external data along with issue fields?
First, we'll talk about the triggering part. Go to the reference docs, modules, and trigger. Search the docs for triggers. You'll find it here. There's a link to all of the Jira events. So these are all the events that your app can subscribe to. Put these things inside the manifest. And let's say, for instance, I wanted to, every time an issue is updated, you would have this inside your manifest. If you go to Forge Create and choose trigger test, give it a random name, choose triggers and validators here, Jira. If you go to Forge Create and choose triggers, it'll scaffold an app for you that shows the manifest with all the settings you'll need. Every time your app is installed, it automatically subscribes to that product event. You map that event to code you want to run as the invocation whenever that event takes place. I didn't see. If you search for triggers on the docs, you'll be taken to some example apps on how to do this.
Another question is, when you deploy a new version from an app, get all installations in the stage the new version automatic, or the admin has to update manually in the cloud?
That's a great question. It gets updated automatically to all the installations with the exception of if you make material change to, let's say, let me go back to my editor. I go inside my I can change code like crazy all the JavaScript code I want, and do a Forge deploy, it would automatically get deployed, right? But if I make a change to, let's say, in particular, I say material change, permissions of my app, it would require admin intervention, because now I might be asking to do additional things. These permissions are external, but there's other permissions, increasing the scope of API calls can make into Jira or Confluence. If you make material changes to the manifest, particularly around permissions, it will require administrator interaction. If not, it's just a minor version change and automatically gets deployed.
Thanks, Neil. And to one last question, will you attending Team 25 in person?
Oh my gosh, how could I forget? Yes, absolutely. I'll be in Anaheim. I'll be present on day 1, April 8th in the morning. We have 2 Forge tutorials, or essentially developer training sessions, not at the caliber of training that you might get like from the learning team professionals. We are just a bunch of dev advocates and hackers. But for the past couple teams, we put together, some Forge dev training. There are 2 of them. One of them starts at like 8:30 in the morning and it goes for 3.5 hours. It's essentially introduction to Forge. And so very basic getting started stuff. We build some apps. In the afternoon is intermediate Forge development training. And that's where we attack more advanced use cases. Yes is the short answer to your question. But moreover, if you're going to team and you're like, boy, that's great, I'd love to see the keynote, I'm not doing certifications, come to developer training, go to the event registration site and modify your registration. You'll see the ability to add that. It is $50 per class. And honestly, we do that so people feel committed and will show up, because if we made it free, like there's only 75 seats. And I can't check at this very moment, but it's possible that it's sold out, the beginner one. But last time I checked, there might have been a few seats free. The intermediate might have a dozen free, but it's filling up fast. Head over to your team registration if you're interested and sign up.
You mentioned Forge can expose APIs for third parties. How exactly can that be done?
Yeah.
From the same person? The other one is, will there be sessions in relation to Forge Remote? And speaking of Forge Remote, Neil, would you advise taking the Forge Remote route?
If you go to guides, they're called web triggers. When you create a web trigger from the Forge CLI, you'll get an endpoint. That is the endpoint in which you can essentially get external calls in to your app. Read up a lot on that, because that is, now you're talking about ingressing data potentially, right? So yes, mechanically it exists. To your question on Forge Remote, it depends on your use case. I'd recommend the Forge Remote documentation. This gives you the ability to architect your apps, particularly a complex app, to run compute externally. You can reach out to me, but if you have an architectural question or best practices, post it on community.developer.atlassian.com.
Thanks for joining and staying with us